Good afternoon and welcome to the second cycle of webinars of Feeding Knowledge project. My name is Jenny Calabrese. I'm a researcher in the Department of Organic Agriculture at the Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Bari, and I'm responsible for the sub-priority biodiversity inside the Priority 1, Sustainable Natural Resource Management, in the Feeding Knowledge program. Before introducing the speaker of today's webinar, I would like to show a short video showing the relationship between diversity, climate change, and food security.
The Mediterranean region is characterized by high population growth rate, by limited land and water, and by a very rich biodiversity. Biological diversity means the variability among living organisms from all sources and includes diversity within species, between species, and diversity of ecosystems. It is not just a list of species, it relates to the interrelation between the species co-evolving in a given habitat or system. The importance of biodiversity in the frame of food security and global sustainability is optimally shown in the report about the state of environment of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment that describes the relationship between biodiversity and ecosystem services. Food provisioning is a very important service. But even other key functions of the ecosystem are dependent on biodiversity, as the provision of basic material for life or for health. The ecosystem services more related to environmental aspects are very important too. They may relate to climate, flood and disease regulation, or to water purification, or to public security from disaster. It is therefore easy to understand how the biodiversity loss, with consequent reduction of delivery of ecosystem services, has a very high economic and social costs, not only in terms of environmental sustainability, but also to reduce poverty, hunger, and diseases all over the world. Biodiversity is the origin of plants and animals that form the basis of agriculture. It has enabled farming systems to evolve since agriculture was invented about 10,000 years ago in many parts of the world, including the Mediterranean, the birthplace of European agriculture. All population, but in a stronger way the population of poorer regions in the Mediterranean area, greatly depends on biodiversity richness. Many rural households depend on rain-fed farming as well as on fishing and on hunting to meet their basic needs. Consequently, the loss of biodiversity undermines the potential for economic growth and limits the food options of such population. Of the approximately 15,000 species of mammals and birds, only 30 to 40 were domesticated for food production, and fewer than 14 species, including cattle, goats, sheep and chicken, provide 90% of global trading livestock production at present. According to FAO, about 7,000 species of plants have been cultivated since man began farming, but today only 30 crops provide 90% of dietary needs of the world's population, with wheat, rice and corn providing about half of the food globally consumed. In recent decades, there has been an alarming genetic erosion of these species. Loss of genetic diversity can occur through poorly planned replacement or local variety of crops, or can also result from intruding invasive alien species, pests, weeds and diseases, land use changes, and environmental degradation. Habitat size and number of species are systematically related. A 2007 study conducted by the National Science Foundation found that biodiversity and genetic diversity are codependent, that diversity among species requires diversity within a species and vice versa. The spatial intensity and variation in precipitation, the increase in air temperature and the higher concentration of atmospheric CO2 are three major parameters that, because of the climate change, will influence agricultural production in the future. This will create new conditions related to land and water availability for agricultural production and modification of agroecosystem. Most plant processes related to growth and yield are highly temperature dependent, and a shifting of agroecological zone is expected. Climate change will have an impact on agricultural biodiversity by increasing the genetic erosion of land races and threatening wild species, including crop wild relatives. Food production and access to appropriate variety in many African countries will be severely compromised, exacerbating food security problems and malnutrition. There will be a need for adapted germplasm, and this will require characterization, evaluation, and availability of materials coming from hotspot areas and/or stored in gene banks all over the world. Conservation of genetic resources will become a key issue, and in-depth analyses are needed to focus on benefits and threats that might arise time by time from the in situ and the ex situ modalities of conservation to better enable choices. Since agricultural biodiversity is both the result of natural and human selection, not only its conservation, but even its sustainable use is essential for the future of agricultural production. And, as a consequence, the access of poor population to these genetic resources will become essential. In this view, the FAO International Treaty and the work of its Secretariat are very important indeed.
The speaker of today is Dr. Mario Marino. Mario Marino graduated in 1990 as agronomist at the University of Latouche, Viterbo in Italy, and achieved his PhD in agrobiology and agrochemistry at the University Frederick II of Naples. He worked as an officer in the Rural Development Department at the Ministry of Agriculture in the seed unit on certification. He was as well in charge of the agro-environmental unit at the same ministry. He is in FAO since 2008 in the Secretariat of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. As an officer, he is in charge to coordinate the capacity building program of the treaty, plan and monitor the program of work on the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, support on behalf of the Secretariat to the implementation of the Farmers' Right. Following the speech, a question time session is foreseen. Please write your question in the chat box at the bottom of the screen on the right, and Dr. Marino will answer after this speech. Thank you. So, welcome, Mario Marino. The International Treaty is an important tool. Where it comes from and what is its history?
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you in particular to SIAM and YAM to take me this opportunity to provide you information about this important legally binding instrument. You request to me to reply in a few seconds, maybe, about the history of the treaty. As you can see in this slide, you have, first of all, I would like to draw the attention of our attendees, in particular about the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, that was adopted in the 1992. And this convention declared the importance of genetic resources, in particular also about food and agriculture, but in a broad sense, and create the better condition to put in the political agenda at that time the importance of conservation, sustainable use, and access to these genetic resources. One thing that I suppose is very important is that the genetic resources, since the adoption of this convention, are not a common heritage of humanity anymore, but in particular are under the control of each state. And this created a little bit some problems, in particular in order to have speedy access to these genetic resources. And FAO, recognizing the importance of the new convention, started in the 1994 to adopt some resolutions and start practically a negotiation on to create a customized access and benefit sharing system. After 7 years, in FAO, the conference adopted the treaty. And now we are 128 contracting parties.
So now you gave us some hints about the international treaty. But what are the main objectives of this FAO international treaty?
Okay, about the treaty objectives, I think that we have to consider the close interlinkages between the Convention on Biological Diversity and the FAO Treaty. This means that the conservation in all forms of farming, in situ and ex situ, and also the sustainable use of plant genetic resources is the first objective. The second one is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits deriving from the use of this genetic material. And an element that I would like to underline is the food security, because this is the key word in particular in order to implement the next steps in agriculture. In fact, as you can see here, in addition to the food security, another key word is the interdependence. Because the interdependence, meaning that no countries around the world are self-sufficient about their material. And we need to exchange this material between the countries in the better way, and in particular in order to facilitate the access and the research. Let me say something about the crops. In fact, 20 crops represent now the 90% of the entire food in our dishes. Crops that are spread all over the world enforce food security, and this means that we have to conserve all different forms of varieties in the sense of wild varieties, neglected, underutilized, and we will see in the next slides, in particular, this particularly focus. Another element that I would like to draw the attention is the policy relevance of the treaty, in particular the bottom-up approach, in which the farmers and the politicians can together work in order to stress the importance of the food security and stress the importance of the conservation. Of course, concepts like genetic erosion, crop adaptation to climate change, food security in the sense of help to the rural poverty and smallholder farmers are the other consideration of the same scenario. One is important to consider, don't forget in particular the activities of the farmers, because you know, there was no limitation before the globalization, of course, and before the recent activities in the seed multiplication and so on, to exchange this material among the farmers. And because the objective was and is, of course, to increase the productivity, in particular facing the next challenges of the climate change and feed the growing population. And the farmers created the crops, and it is very interesting in that sense to understand the role acknowledged to the farmers in the treaty, because an entire article of the treaty has been dedicated to the farmers' rights, and because they have had a key role in order to conserve in the past, in the present, and also for the future generation, the material. In fact, here you can see how we can realize these farmers' rights at the national level. First of all, the farmers' rights is a concept that rests under the control of the national states. And the possibility to implement these farmers' rights is dealing with the recognition of their role, to take part of the decision and, through cooperations and so on, and in particular in the developing countries where the majority of the material has been originated, to give to them and to provide to them and to share with them the benefits derived from the use of this material.
So now, you explain about the objectives of the treaty, the role of the farmer, but what about the sustainable use of such genetic resources for food and agriculture?
Yeah, this is another concept that we have already mentioned, but the sustainability refers in particular to the rational use of any renewable resources in such a manner that the resources is not depleted for the future use. And believe me, it's not very simple to, and is a little bit complicated to simplify this concept. But I think that the treaty can represent a comprehensive approach in that. Because he presented the sustainability in agriculture like an holistic approach, not only focusing on specific issue like, for example, soil, water, and so on, but considering all the scenario, and in particular all the elements that can represent the sustainability. In French, they use to call this durable. I think is more clear. Yeah, it's clearer than other words like sustainable. Anyway, the sustainable use, in order to continue this concept, is intensifying the food production, for example, or create and educated markets, share responsibility, and to provide, why not, also incentives to the farmers. This is I think, a very good point in which probably a webinar can be considered in the rural development of the European Union. They are acknowledging to the farmers this new role, in particular like custodians of the biodiversity in agriculture. And finally, also implement and endorse the market for biodiversity products like organic markets, traditional and local varieties, and underutilized species that can represent a good reply to the climate change adaptation and mitigation effect. I would not spend, because we know we have a limitation of time, but just to say 2 words about the modeling of a climate change, because the sustainability in agriculture can mitigate the negative effect of the climate change, and in particular the farmer choices, because you can embrace a very good quantity of the material. In this case, the farmers have more possibility to choose what they would like to see. Mm-hmm. And finally, the gene bank characterization, because this is another key point, because some traits are important for the future breeding programs, but if we don't have the material, the devices, and so on to characterize them, is a little bit difficult to implement this issue. Yeah, and this is more or less the sustainability in agriculture.
Now we have the objective, the role of farmer, the sustainability, but you have to highlight what are the pillars of these international treaties, how it works.
Yeah, in fact, I already put to show this slides, because I think that one pillar, we can consider one of the main pillars of the treaty, the conservation of the material. Mm-hmm. We don't need the zoo, we don't need the museum, we don't need, in particular in agriculture, something that cannot be reflected directly into the field, and in particular the importance that they can represent. But we need at least like a public sector to evaluate this material. And in that sense, we have been creating like an ongoing process, a multilateral system. In this case, the multilateral system can facilitate the access to this material, and all countries have the possibility that their material that are under their control can be put into the multilateral system and conserve and characterize them and exchange these materials among the countries. This is just to give you a figure. 800 documented transfers every day around the world among the different international agricultural centers are in process, and almost 1.5 million of accessions have been exchanged in the past 4 years following the multilateral system. And the third pillar is the benefit sharing fund. This is under the priorities of the benefit sharing fund. There are, of course, all the concepts that we have already mentioned: sustainable use of farm management and conservation, information exchange, capacity building, and technology transfer. But the key continuously rests the farmers. And yeah, this is the three pillars, I think, that we can present the progress that we have made so far, in particular because we have launched a first project cycle with a total amount of $500,000. 11 projects have been funded. In particular, we are now very close to approach the final results of this first cycle. The second one is ongoing. We have more or less $5.5 million, and 90 projects have been selected, and each project more or less up to $400,000. And the third one will be hopefully finalized for the next session of the governing body that will be organized in Oman in September.
So now, in order to explain better, I know that you have some pictures to show, and you can talk us a little bit about this projects that are being funded by the benefit sharing fund.
Yeah, just thank you. Yeah, 2 words about the projects, in particular the first and the second course, because as you can see here, there is the distribution of the Vavilov centers of origin of crop plants. And as you can see, the first and the second call is dealing with these centers because the main objective of both of the calls are the in situ conservation, on-farm conservation, more than ex situ conservation. In this case, also the participatory, you said, is participatory to take a decision and to elaborate a new strategy is one of the objectives of this call. Here we are in India, from the seed part, the seeding part until the selection of the material directly into the field. In fact, in this case, we are in Kerala. We established a village level enterprises, and the crops that were selected are more than 20 at the end of the project. Here you can see the field visit in which farmers and farmers associations at the end of these 2 years of work selected the final material. Here we are in Peru, in Cusco, in the potato park. Here is another key challenge for the treaty, in particular because we worked with 6 indigenous communities all together. They put all the material that they conserved, they are conserving in particular, but in addition to the local material, other materials were taking part of these projects, in particular about the repatriation of the Ethiopians' potatoes, and this meaning that the native potatoes with the new traits of gene have the possibility to combine all the added value that they
acquired.
Yes. And finally, in Zambia, this is part of the second call for proposal. And this is 1 out of 3 training programs that we have already organized, and about the implementation of the international treaty, and in particular about the conservation, sustainable use in local. This meaning that the final evaluation and the final monitoring of this project will be to establish in different parts of Zambia the local gene banks. This is ongoing, of course, and we are approaching to finalize also this second call.
So finally, I saw your last slide. Try to summarize the real importance of the treaty for the climate change. Just with few words, just focusing on this important tool.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that before entering into details, I will be very brief, believe me, also because I can imagine that there are a lot of concepts presented in this presentation. I don't want to be boring. But here, the challenges about the climate change in the context of plant genetic resources is the plant breeding and how we can imagine to endorse the plant breeding through a participatory approach in plant breeding. And we are approaching also, in addition to the usual plant breeding, a pre-breeding phase. And this is another interesting challenge that we can imagine to facing the climate change adaptation mitigation. Making use of the potential of minor crops and to characterize and evaluate the PGRFA, dealing with the gene banks, ex situ gene banks, is absolutely necessary. How does the treaty help in this context? to make and to create the better condition to work in the multilateral approach in the multilateral system is an important precondition. This is not only my point of view, of course, but also the point of view of the governing body of the international treaty that reiterated this importance. And the benefit sharing fund is, of course, another pillar that we presented, and because it's directly has a direct impact into the field. And finally, of course, the both instruments addressing adaptation to the climate change, discovering new traits and discovering the possibility to combine this added value coming from the conservation of the material in new products. I think that this is all for my presentation, and I hope that it has been more or less clear. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Marino, for your interesting presentation. Now, question time is open. Of course, if the time session is limited, that you have a lot of questions, Dr. Marino will be glad to answer to remaining questions through the Feeding Knowledge Facebook and Twitter official pages. So, I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. And I received, in the meantime that I was in the presentation, arrived at least three, maybe more than three. Seven questions. And the second one is, can we define the farmers' rights as a practical example of sustainable use of PGRFA? I would say in a very simple way, yes, we can, because it's a definition to define farmers' rights is practically speaking to define a sustainable use of PGRFA. I think that I cannot show you, of course, a document of the governing body, but we have already prepared a compilation for the next governing body of views and experiences of the implementation of farmers' rights. And in many countries, there is no specific acknowledgement about the farmers' rights, but there are, of course, these rights that has been realizing through other legislations like Seed Act, protection of plant varieties, and environmental plans. Yes, different routes in which you can find different references to the farmers and the farmers' rights. India, that's why we chosen the India project. India is one of these countries that has already endorsed implemented the farmers' rights because they have a rule on that. And just to support once again that the farmers' right is a practical example of sustainable use, I would say that the implementation of this important acknowledgement is de facto the added value of plant genetic resources, because if we can create a better condition for the farmers to work in the field and to have this to act like a custodians of biodiversity, they can, of course, to receive also additional funds, not only under the concept of monetary benefit sharing, but also through the transfer of technologies, something that already happened in this institute as part of the scenario of this institute.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. Okay, small communities of farmers are they taken into consideration by the treaty? Yes, we have already answered to this.
Is there any strategic plan?
Yes, this is another one.
For the benefit sharing fund in the next future?
Yeah, there is a strategic plan. Yeah, is absolutely true. We adopted the strategic plan in 2009, and
What's the time span of this strategic?
It's 5 years until 2014, and the idea was, and practically is to reach $160 million in order to implement the activities of the projects on conservation and sustainable use in the field. So far, we reached the 20% of these goals. But you know, it's clear is in front of all of us the budget constraints and the difficulties to raise funds. But the voluntary contributions, in particular from some countries and from also philanthropy of this is ongoing, of course.
Maybe question time is finished, but Dr. Marina will be happy to answer to your question in the second time. Let me briefly thank the speaker of today's webinar. Thank you, Mario, for being here and explaining in so clear way the importance of the international treaty. Thank you all of you for attending this event, and I give the floor to my colleague, Dr. Taher Yassin, for the announcement of next webinar on the Feeding Knowledge Project.
Thank you, Jenny. I just have to spend a few seconds to announce that the new webinar. The next webinar will be held on 9th of April, and it will discuss the quantitative assessment of biotic constraints to crop productivity. The speaker will be Professor Richard Strange, who is an honorary professor of biology in the University of London, and he is editor-in-chief in the journal Food Security. Food Security journal is important because speaking about science, sociology, and economics for food production and access to food. I hope to see you all online. I'm waiting for you on 9th of April at 15 afternoon. See you. I hope to see you all. Thank you. Thank you all. I hope I will give the floor again to Professor Mario, who will continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I don't want to continue any discussion. Just to congratulate with the organization, in particular the people that are working behind the desk, and because we have received a very strong, really professional support. I'm very glad to take part of these projects, and I believe that we will can take into account the possibility to have a second session on specific activities of FAO in conservation sustainable use. Thank you very much. Bye.